Violet Whitmore, a 64-year-old woman known as one of the most successful businesswomen in the United States, faced a devastating loss when her only son, Jonathan, and her daughter-in-law, Claire, tragically died in a helicopter crash while exploring a remote forest in Scotland. Since then, Violet had dedicated herself to caring for her only granddaughter, 4-year-old Zoe, welcoming her into her luxurious mansion. However, social workers from Child Protective Services intervened, claiming that Violet did not meet the emotional requirements needed to care for Zoe. During a court hearing, when the judge allowed the child to speak, everyone in the room was shocked by what Zoe said. The Chicago skyline gleamed in the late afternoon sun, a testament to human ambition and progress. At the heart of this urban jungle, in a penthouse office on the 78th floor of a sleek skyscraper, stood Violet Whitmore. At 64, she cut an imposing figure against the floor-to-ceiling windows, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her tailored navy suit a sharp contrast to the warm golden light flooding the room. Violet's piercing blue eyes scanned the city below, a city she had conquered in more ways than one. As the CEO of Whitmore Innovations, she had revolutionized the tech industry with groundbreaking AI algorithms and sustainable energy solutions. Her business acumen was legendary, her name synonymous with success and uncompromising standards. "Ms. Whitmore," her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your 4 o'clock is here." Violet pressed a button. "Send them in, Diane." Her voice was cool, controlled, the voice of a woman accustomed to command. The door opened, and 2 men in expensive suits entered. Violet didn't turn around immediately, letting them stew in the uncomfortable silence for a moment. It was a tactic she'd perfected over the years, establishing dominance before a word was even spoken. "Gentlemen," she finally said, turning to face them with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I trust you have good news for me." The men exchanged nervous glances. Ms. Whitmore, the older of the two, began, "We've reviewed the proposal for the new solar farm project and..." Violet arched an eyebrow, her patience already wearing thin. "There are concerns about the environmental impact. The location you've chosen is perfect." Violet cut him off sharply. "I didn't ask for concerns, Mr. Daniels. I asked for solutions. Do you have any of those for me today?" The younger man cleared his throat. "We've prepared an alternative proposal. If we could just..." Violet held up a hand, silencing him. "You have until tomorrow morning to make my original plan work. I don't accept alternatives, I create opportunities, are we clear?" Both men nodded, understanding they were dismissed. As they hurried out of the office, Violet turned back to the window, a small sigh escaping her lips. Another day, another victory. But why did it feel so hollow? Her eyes drifted to a small silver frame on her desk. It was the only personal item in the otherwise sterile office. The photo showed a younger Violet, her arm around a handsome man in his 30s, her son Jonathan. Beside him stood a beautiful woman with a warm smile, Claire, his wife. The photo had been taken just last year at the grand opening of Whitmore Innovations' new headquarters. Violet's hand trembled slightly as she picked up the frame. Jonathan had inherited her drive, and Claire her compassion. They were the perfect team, both in life and in the charitable foundation they ran. Were, past tense. The reality of their loss hit her anew, a fresh wave of grief threatening to overwhelm her carefully constructed composure. The intercom buzzed again. "Ms. Whitmore," Diane's voice was hesitant. I have some news." Something in her assistant's tone made Violet's blood run cold. "What is it, Diane?" "It's about Jonathan and Claire. There's been an accident." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Violet gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles turning white. "What kind of accident?" she managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "Their helicopter. It went down in the Scottish Highlands. Search and rescue teams they've found the wreckage. I'm so sorry, Ms. Whitmore." There were no survivors. The phone slipped from Violet's hand, clattering to the floor. The sound echoed in the suddenly too large office, a discordant note in the symphony of her carefully ordered world. She sank into her chair, her mind reeling, unable to process the information. Jonathan and Claire, gone, just like that. Hours passed in a blur. Violet moved through them in a daze, making necessary calls, setting things in motion with mechanical efficiency. It wasn't until she stood in the doorway of her son's Chicago home that the reality truly hit her. The house was quiet, too quiet. Toys were scattered across the living room floor, evidence of a life interrupted. And there, curled up on the couch, was a small figure with wild curls and tear-stained cheeks. Zoe, her granddaughter, 4 years old and now an orphan. Violet approached cautiously, her usual confidence deserting her. What did one say to a child who had lost everything? She, who could negotiate million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, found herself at a loss for words. "Zoe," she said softly, kneeling beside the couch. "Sweetheart, it's Grandma Violet." The little girl looked up, her big brown eyes, so like Claire's, filled with confusion and fear. "Where's Mommy? Where's Daddy?" Violet felt her heart shatter. How could she explain? How could she possibly make this okay? They had to go away, sweetheart," she said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "But I'm here. I'm going to take care of you now." Zoe's lower lip trembled. "But I want Mommy and Daddy," she whimpered. Violet reached out, hesitating for a moment, before gently stroking Zoe's hair. "I know, sweetheart. I know." She pulled the little girl into her arms, feeling small hands clutch at her jacket as sobs racked the tiny body. As she held her granddaughter, Violet felt a maelstrom of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Grief for her son and daughter-in-law, fear of the responsibility now thrust upon her, and a deep, aching love for this small child who was now her only family. "What am I going to do?" she whispered, more to herself than to Zoe. For the first time in decades, Violet Whitmore, the woman who always had a plan, who always knew what to do, found herself completely and utterly lost. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity, funeral arrangements, legal matters, press statements. Violet handled it all with her trademark efficiency. But every night, as she sat in the guest room of Jonathan and Claire's house, listening to Zoe's muffled sobs through the wall, she felt her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "You should hire a nanny," her CFO Richard suggested during a brief meeting at the house. "Someone experienced in dealing with trauma. You can't be expected to handle this on top of everything else." Violet bristled at his words. "She's my granddaughter, Richard, not a problem to be handled." "I didn't mean—" He backpedaled, but Violet cut him off. "I know what you meant, and I appreciate your concern, but Zoe is my responsibility now. I'll figure it out." As Richard left, Violet caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her usually impeccable appearance was showing signs of strain. She straightened her shoulders, trying to summon her usual air of authority. "Grandma Violet," a small voice called from upstairs. "Can you come here?" Violet took a deep breath, steeling herself. She climbed the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. Zoe was sitting on her bed, clutching a stuffed elephant that Jonathan had brought back from a business trip to India. "What is it, sweetheart?" Violet asked, hovering awkwardly in the doorway. Zoe looked up, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Can you tell me a story about Daddy when he was little?" The request caught Violet off guard. Stories weren't her forte. Spreadsheets and business plans, yes, but bedtime tales. She hesitated for a moment before sitting down on the edge of the bed. "Well," she began, her voice uncertain, "when your daddy was about your age, he decided he wanted to fly." As she recounted the tale of Jonathan's attempt to launch himself off the garage roof with homemade wings, Violet felt something shift inside her. Zoe scooted closer, her eyes wide with wonder, drinking in every word about the father she'd lost. For the first time since the accident, Violet felt a tiny spark of something. Not happiness exactly, but perhaps hope. As Zoe drifted off to sleep, clutching her elephant, Violet realized that maybe, just maybe, she could do this. But the challenges were far from over. The next morning, as Violet tried to coax Zoe to eat breakfast, her phone rang incessantly. Business couldn't be put on hold forever, no matter how much she wished it could. "Ms. Whitmore," Diane's voice came through the speaker. "The board is requesting an emergency meeting. They're concerned about the company's direction in light of recent events." Violet looked at Zoe, who was listlessly pushing cereal around her bowl. "Tell them I'll be there in an hour," she said, making a split-second decision. "And Diane, find me the best child psychologist in Chicago. We have an appointment to make." As she hung up, Violet felt the weight of her two worlds colliding. The boardroom and the playground, spreadsheets and bedtime stories. How could she possibly bridge that gap? But as she looked at Zoe, this small, vulnerable piece of Jonathan and Claire that she was now responsible for. Violet knew she had to try. For the first time in her life, success wasn't just about profit margins and market shares. It was about healing a broken little heart, including her own. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with tears, laughter, and moments of sheer terror. But Violet Whitmore had never backed down from a challenge before. She wouldn't start now. With a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and prepared to face the day and the new life that awaited them both. The Whitmore Industries boardroom was silent, tension hanging thick in the air. Violet sat at the head of the long mahogany table, her posture rigid, her gaze steady, as she surveyed the faces of her executive team. She could read the uncertainty in their eyes, the questions they were too afraid to voice. "Well?" Violet broke the silence, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. "I believe we have some matters to discuss." Richard cleared his throat, shuffling the papers in front of him nervously. "Violet, we're all deeply sorry for your loss. Jonathan was not just your son, but a valued member of this company. His absence, well, it's left a significant void." Violet's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm well aware of that, Richard. What I'm not aware of is why this required an emergency board meeting." Another executive, Sarah Chen, leaned forward. "Ms. Whitmore, there are concerns about the company's direction. With you taking on the responsibility of caring for your granddaughter, some investors are worried about your ability to maintain focus." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Violet's icy gaze fixed on Sarah. "Are you suggesting that I'm incapable of managing both my personal and professional responsibilities, Ms. Chen?" Sarah held her ground, though her voice wavered slightly. "Not at all. We're simply expressing concern about the unprecedented nature of this situation. Perhaps if we could discuss some contingency plans." "Contingency plans?" Violet interrupted, her tone dangerously calm. "Let me be very clear. My personal circumstances have changed, yes, but my commitment to this company, to the vision that I have built over decades, remains unwavering. I don't need contingency plans. What I need is your support and your trust that I can navigate this situation." She stood, smoothing down her impeccable suit. "Now, if there are no other baseless concerns to address, I believe we have actual business to attend to. Shall we begin?" The meeting proceeded, but Violet could feel the undercurrent of doubt that persisted. As she walked back to her office afterward, she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, leaning against the wall of the empty elevator. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, closing her eyes briefly. "You have to do this." The ding of the elevator jolted her back to reality. Straightening up, she marched into her office, where Diane was waiting with a stack of papers and a concerned expression. "Ms. Whitmore, I've scheduled an appointment with Dr. Elizabeth Harding for tomorrow at 2 p.m. She's one of the top child psychologists in Chicago, specializing in trauma and grief counseling." Violet nodded, sinking into her chair. "Thank you, Diane." "And the nanny agencies?" "I've compiled profiles from the top 3 agencies in the city. They're all experienced in dealing with high-profile clients and children who've experienced loss." As Violet flipped through the profiles, a wave of uncertainty washed over her. These women all looked capable, with glowing recommendations and impressive credentials, but something felt off. "Ms. Whitmore?" Diane's voice broke through her thoughts. "Is everything all right?" Violet looked up, realizing she'd been staring at the same page for several minutes. "Yes, I'm not sure this is the right approach." Diane hesitated before speaking. "If I may, Ms. Whitmore, have you considered that maybe what Zoe needs most right now is you?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Violet's first instinct was to dismiss it. After all, what did she know about raising a child? But as she opened her mouth to respond, she found herself thinking of Zoe's face when she'd told that story about Jonathan, the way the little girl had looked at her, with such trust and need. I'll think about it," Violet said finally. "Thank you, Diane. That will be all for now." As Diane left, Violet turned to the window, her mind racing. Could she really do this? Be both a CEO and a guardian to a traumatized 4-year-old? The rational part of her brain said no, that it was impossible. But another part, a part she barely recognized, whispered that maybe, just maybe, it was worth trying. The next day, Violet found herself sitting in Dr. Harding's waiting room, Zoe clutching her hand tightly. The little girl hadn't spoken a word since they'd left the house, her eyes wide and wary as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. Zoe Whitmore. A kind-faced woman with graying hair and warm brown eyes appeared in the doorway. "I'm Dr. Harding. Would you like to come in and play with some special toys I have?" Zoe looked up at Violet, uncertainty written all over her face. Violet squeezed her hand gently. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'll be right here waiting for you." As Zoe disappeared into the office with Dr. Harding, Violet felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. She pulled out her phone, intending to catch up on some emails, but found herself unable to focus. Instead, her mind kept drifting to Zoe, wondering what was happening behind that closed door. An hour later, Dr. Harding emerged alone. "Ms. Whitmore, could you join us, please?" Violet followed her into the office, where Zoe was quietly coloring at a small table. The little girl didn't look up as they entered. "Please have a seat." Dr. Harding gestured to a comfortable armchair. "First, I want to assure you that Zoe is processing her grief in a normal, age-appropriate way. However, her withdrawal is concerning. She's created a protective shell around herself, and it's going to take time and patience to help her emerge from it." Violet nodded, her eyes fixed on Zoe. "What can I do? Should I hire a full-time therapist, a grief counselor?" Dr. Harding smiled gently. "Those resources can be helpful, but what Zoe needs most right now is stability and love. She needs to know that she's safe, that she's not going to be abandoned again, and that, Ms. Whitmore, is something only you can provide." The words hit Violet like a physical blow. "Me? But I don't know the first thing about raising a child. Surely someone more qualified." "You're her grandmother," Dr. Harding interrupted softly. "You're her link to her parents, to her past. You're uniquely qualified to help her through this." As they continued to talk, discussing strategies and techniques for helping Zoe, Violet felt a growing sense of determination. It wouldn't be easy, but then again, nothing worthwhile ever was. The next few weeks were a blur of adjustments and challenges. Violet found herself in a constant balancing act, trying to maintain her grip on the company, while also creating a nurturing environment for Zoe. She converted one of the spare rooms in her penthouse into a bedroom for Zoe, filling it with stuffed animals, books, and colorful decorations. But despite her efforts, Zoe remained withdrawn, speaking only when absolutely necessary. One evening, as Violet attempted to coax Zoe into eating her dinner, her phone buzzed incessantly. She glanced at it, seeing a string of urgent messages from Richard about a potential crisis with a major client. "Zoe, sweetheart, I need to take this call. Can you be a big girl and finish your dinner while I step into the other room?" Zoe nodded silently, pushing her peas around the plate. Violet hesitated for a moment before stepping out onto the balcony to take the call. "Richard, what's the situation?" she demanded, her CEO persona snapping into place. As Richard detailed the problem, a manufacturing defect that could potentially lead to a massive recall, Violet found her attention divided. Half of her mind was already formulating strategies to mitigate the damage, while the other half couldn't help but worry about the little girl sitting alone at the dining table. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, she said finally, ending the call. But as she turned to go back inside, she froze. Zoe stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "You're leaving?" she whispered, her voice small and broken. Violet felt her heart shatter. She knelt down, reaching out to Zoe. "No, sweetheart, I'm not leaving you. I just have to go to the office for a little while to fix a problem. Mrs. Henderson from next door will stay with you, and I'll be back before you know it." But Zoe shook her head violently, backing away. "No, you can't go. Mommy and Daddy went away and they didn't come back. You can't go too." The raw fear in Zoe's voice struck Violet to her core. In that moment, the crisis at work seemed insignificant compared to the crisis unfolding in front of her. Making a split-second decision, Violet pulled out her phone again. "Richard, I can't come in. You'll have to handle this one without me. I trust you to make the right decisions. Keep me updated." She ended the call before Richard could protest, turning her full attention to Zoe. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. I'm right here with you always." As she gathered the sobbing child into her arms, Violet felt something shift inside her. For the first time, she was putting someone else's needs before the company's, before her own. And strangely, it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like strength. The next morning, Violet woke early, her mind already racing with plans. She had a 9 a.m. meeting with potential investors, a conference call at 11, and a lunch meeting with... She stopped, her gaze falling on the family photo on her nightstand. Jonathan and Claire's smiling faces looked back at her, and she could almost hear her son's voice. "What's really important, Mum?" With a deep breath, Violet reached for her phone. "Diane, I need you to clear my schedule for the day, and, for the foreseeable future, I want all non-essential meetings pushed to the afternoons. My mornings are no longer available." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Of course, Ms. Whitmore. May I ask why?" Violet smiled softly. "I have a standing breakfast date with my granddaughter." As she hung up, Violet felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. She was stepping into uncharted territory, but for the first time in years, she felt truly alive. In the kitchen, she fumbled with pans and ingredients, attempting to make the pancakes that Zoe had once mentioned loving. The first batch was a disaster, burnt on the outside, raw in the middle. The second wasn't much better. But by the third try, she had produced a stack of somewhat misshapen but edible pancakes. "Zoe," she called softly, knocking on the little girl's door. "I made breakfast. Would you like to come eat with me?" There was no response, but Violet hadn't expected one. She opened the door gently to find Zoe already awake, sitting on her bed and clutching her stuffed elephant. "I made pancakes," Violet said, trying to keep her voice light. "They're not as good as your mum's, I'm sure, but I thought we could eat together. Maybe you could tell me how to make them better next time." Zoe looked up, surprise flickering across her face. Slowly, hesitantly, she nodded and climbed out of bed. As they sat at the kitchen island, Violet cutting Zoe's pancakes into small pieces, she felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much. Zoe still didn't speak, but it was a start. "You know," Violet said as she poured syrup on Zoe's plate, "your daddy loved pancakes too. When he was little, he once tried to make them all by himself. He ended up with flour all over the kitchen. It looked like it had snowed inside." The ghost of a smile flitted across Zoe's face, there and gone so quickly Violet almost thought she'd imagined it, but it was enough to strengthen her resolve. Over the next few weeks, Violet established a new routine. Mornings were for Zoe, breakfast together, followed by activities designed to draw the little girl out of her shell. Some days they read stories, other days they attempted simple crafts. Violet discovered she had absolutely no artistic talent, much to her chagrin. In the afternoons, while Zoe napped or played quietly, Violet would work from home, taking calls and video conferences from her study. It wasn't easy. There were days when Zoe's continued silence felt like an insurmountable wall, days when the pressure from work threatened to overwhelm her. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. One morning, as Violet struggled to follow a YouTube tutorial on how to braid hair, she heard something that made her heart stop. A giggle, soft and brief, but unmistakable. She looked down to see Zoe watching her with amusement, a small smile playing on her lips. "Oh, you think this is funny, do you?" Violet said, her own lips twitching. "Well, I'll have you know that in the business world, this would be considered a very avant-garde hairstyle." Zoe's smile grew wider, and Violet felt as though the sun had finally broken through after an endless storm. But just as things seemed to be improving at home, new challenges arose at work. Violet's reduced hours and remote work hadn't gone unnoticed, and whispers of discontent were growing among the board members. "Violet, we need to talk," Richard cornered her after a particularly tense video conference. "The board is concerned. Our stock prices have dipped, and there's talk of bringing in outside management to stabilize things." Violet felt a flash of anger. "Stabilize? We're still outperforming our competitors in every market. What exactly needs stabilizing?" Richard sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "It's not just about the numbers, Violet. It's about perception. The company needs a leader who's fully committed." The implication hung heavy in the air. Violet opened her mouth to deliver a scathing retort, but at that moment she heard Zoe calling for her from the other room. "This discussion isn't over, Richard," she said, her voice low and determined. "But right now I have more important matters to attend to." As she walked away, Violet felt the weight of her two worlds pressing down on her. How long could she keep this balancing act up? Something would have to give eventually. But as she entered the living room to find Zoe holding up a drawing, the first she'd made since the accident, Violet knew in her heart that she wouldn't let that something be Zoe. The drawing was a simple one, 3 stick figures holding hands. One tall with silver hair, one small with curly hair, and one in the middle with wings. "Is that us?" Violet asked softly, kneeling beside Zoe. "You and me and your daddy?" Zoe nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Daddy's an angel now," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. "He watches over us." Violet felt her own eyes fill with tears as she pulled Zoe into a tight hug. "Yes, sweetheart, he does, and he'd be so proud of you." As she held her granddaughter, Violet made a silent vow. She would find a way to make this work, for Zoe, for Jonathan's memory, and for herself. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles both personal and professional. But Violet Whitmore had never backed down from a challenge before, and she certainly wasn't about to start now. The Chicago Tribune's headline glared at Violet from her tablet screen. "Whitmore Industries in turmoil. Is the Ice Queen's reign melting?" The article was a scathing critique of her recent leadership, questioning her ability to balance her personal life with her professional responsibilities. Violet's jaw clenched as she scrolled through the piece, each word feeling like a personal attack. "Ms. Whitmore," Diane's voice came through the intercom. "The board is assembled for the emergency meeting. They're waiting for you in the conference room." Violet took a deep breath, straightening her suit jacket. "Thank you, Diane. I'll be right there." As she made her way to the conference room, Violet couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a lion's den. The tension in the air was palpable as she entered. The faces of the board members a mix of concern, disappointment, and in some cases, barely concealed opportunism. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Violet began, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her stomach. "I understand there are concerns about the company's direction, and I'm here to address them." Richard cleared his throat. "Violet, we've all read the Tribune article. While we understand your personal circumstances, the fact remains that the company's performance has been less than stellar in recent months." "Less than stellar?" Violet raised an eyebrow. "We're still outperforming our competitors in 3 out of 4 markets. Our new sustainable energy initiative is set to launch next quarter, which analysts predict will boost our stock prices significantly." Sarah Chen leaned forward. "That may be true, but investor confidence is waning. There's a perception that you're distracted, that Whitmore Industries is no longer your top priority." The words hit Violet like a physical blow. For decades, this company had been her life, her legacy. The insinuation that she was somehow neglecting it felt like a betrayal. "I assure you," Violet said, her voice taking on an icy edge, "my commitment to this company has not wavered. Yes, my personal circumstances have changed, but I am more than capable of managing both my professional and personal responsibilities." "With all due respect, Violet," another board member, Jack Thompson, interjected, "the numbers don't lie. Our stock has dropped 15% in the last quarter alone. We need to consider bringing in outside management to stabilize things." The room fell silent, the implications of Jack's words hanging heavy in the air. Violet felt a surge of anger, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Mrs. Henderson, Zoe's caretaker. "Emergency. Zoe having severe panic attack. Won't stop crying for you. Please come home ASAP." In that moment, as Violet stared at the message, something inside her shifted. She looked up at the expectant faces of the board members, these people who had been her colleagues and confidants for years, and suddenly saw them in a new light. They were waiting for her to fight, to argue, to defend her position with the ferocity she was known for. Instead, Violet did something that shocked everyone in the room, including herself. She smiled. "You're right," she said softly. "The company does need stability. It needs a leader who can give it their full attention and energy." She paused, looking each board member in the eye. "Which is why, effective immediately, I'm taking a leave of absence." The room erupted in a cacophony of voices, but Violet held up her hand, silencing them. "I've dedicated my life to building Whitmore Industries into what it is today, but right now, there's someone who needs me more. I'm appointing Richard as interim CEO. He knows this company almost as well as I do, and I trust him to lead it through this transition period." Richard's eyes widened in surprise. "Violet, are you sure about this?" She nodded, a sense of calm washing over her. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a very important appointment to keep." With that, Violet walked out of the conference room, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. As the elevator descended, she felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. For the first time in decades, she was stepping into the unknown, prioritizing something above her career. It was terrifying, but it also felt inexplicably right. The drive home was a blur, Violet's mind racing with the implications of her decision. As she rushed into the penthouse, she could hear Zoe's heart-wrenching sobs echoing through the halls. "Zoe?" Violet called out, her heart pounding. "Sweetheart, I'm here." She found Zoe curled up in a corner of her room, her small body shaking with each sob. Mrs. Henderson stood nearby, looking helpless and relieved to see Violet. "She's been like this for an hour," Mrs. Henderson explained. "She had a nightmare about her parents and just broke down." Violet nodded, dismissing Mrs. Henderson with a grateful smile. She approached Zoe slowly, kneeling down beside her. "Zoe, sweetheart, it's Grandma Violet. I'm here now. You're safe." Zoe looked up, her face streaked with tears. You came," she hiccuped. "Of course I came," Violet said softly, opening her arms. "I'll always come when you need me." Zoe hesitated for just a moment before launching herself into Violet's embrace. As she held her granddaughter close, feeling the little girl's tears soaking into her expensive silk blouse, Violet knew she had made the right decision. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustment. Violet's decision to step back from Whitmore Industries made headlines, with opinions ranging from admiration for her dedication to her family to harsh criticism of her abandoning the company she built. One particularly scathing article in a business magazine caught Violet's eye: Whitmore's Folly, How Emotion Toppled an Empire. The piece argued that Violet's decision was a clear sign of weakness, predicting dire consequences for the company's future. As she read the article, sitting on her living room couch with Zoe curled up beside her, engrossed in a coloring book, Violet felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of her, the part that had been the Ice Queen for so long, bristled at the criticism, but another part, a part that was growing stronger every day, simply didn't care. "Grandma?" Zoe's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "What's that?" Violet looked down to see Zoe pointing at the magazine. She smiled, closing the tablet. "Just some people who don't understand what's really important, sweetheart. Now how about we do something fun today? What would you like to do?" Zoe's face lit up. Can we go to the park?" The request was so simple, so normal, that it caught Violet off guard. She realized with a start that she couldn't remember the last time she had been to a park, but the hopeful look in Zoe's eyes made her decision easy. "Of course we can, darling. Let's go right now." As they walked hand in hand through the lush green space of Lincoln Park, Violet felt as though she was seeing the world through new eyes. The sound of children laughing, the smell of freshly cut grass, the warmth of the sun on her face. It was all so vibrant, so alive. Zoe tugged on her hand, pointing excitedly at a group of ducks waddling near the pond. "Grandma, look. Can we feed them?" Violet hesitated. I'm not sure if we're allowed to, sweetheart. And we don't have any bread." A kind-faced elderly woman sitting on a nearby bench overheard them. "You can feed them these," she said, offering a small bag of seeds. "It's better for them than bread anyway." Violet thanked the woman, taking the bag with a grateful smile. As she watched Zoe gleefully tossing seeds to the eager ducks, she felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the summer sun. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of Violet's name being called. She turned to see Catherine Blakely, a fellow CEO and sometimes rival, approaching with a look of surprise on her face. "Violet Whitmore, as I live and breathe. I hardly recognized you without your power suit," Catherine said, her tone a mix of amusement and curiosity. "So the rumors are true, you've really stepped down?" Violet straightened, instinctively adopting her boardroom posture. "Taken a leave of absence, Catherine. There's a difference." Catherine's eyes flickered to Zoe, who had come to stand protectively close to Violet. "Ah, and this must be the reason. Your granddaughter, isn't it?" "Yes, this is Zoe," Violet said, placing a gentle hand on the little girl's shoulder. "Zoe, can you say hello to Mrs. Blakely?" Zoe mumbled a quiet hello, pressing closer to Violet's side. Catherine's expression softened slightly. "She's lovely, Violet. But I have to ask, do you really think you can just walk away from everything you've built? The Violet I know would never let someone else take the reins, especially not in such a crucial time." Violet felt a flicker of her old competitive spirit, the urge to defend her decision, to prove that she hadn't gone soft. But then she felt Zoe's small hand slip into hers, and the feeling faded. "The Violet you knew didn't understand what was truly important, Catherine," she said quietly. "I haven't walked away from anything. I've simply reprioritized. Catherine looked skeptical. And when Zoe starts school? When she doesn't need you every minute of every day? Will you be able to just step back into your old life as if nothing has changed? The question hit closer to home than Violet cared to admit. It was something she had been grappling with herself, but looking down at Zoe, seeing the trust and love in those big brown eyes, she found her answer. No, Catherine. I won't step back into my old life, because I don't want to. This isn't a temporary detour, it's a new path, and honestly, it's the most challenging, rewarding thing I've ever done. Catherine's eyebrows shot up in surprise. She opened her mouth to respond, but Violet cut her off gently. Now, if you'll excuse us, I promised my granddaughter an ice cream. Have a lovely day, Catherine. As they walked away, Zoe looked up at Violet. Grandma, are you okay? Violet smiled, squeezing Zoe's hand. I'm more than okay, sweetheart. I'm exactly where I need to be. The weeks that followed were filled with moments of joy, frustration, and everything in between. Violet found herself navigating a world she had never really been part of before, the world of playground politics, bedtime stories, and band-aids on skinned knees. There were challenges, of course. Violet's perfectionist tendencies often clashed with the chaotic nature of caring for a child. She found herself constantly fighting the urge to schedule and organize every aspect of Zoe's day, to turn playtime into a structured activity with clear goals and outcomes. One particularly trying afternoon, as Violet attempted to coax Zoe into finishing a puzzle they had started, she felt her patience wearing thin. Zoe, sweetheart, we can't just leave it unfinished. We need to complete what we start, Violet insisted, her voice taking on the firm tone she often used in board meetings. Zoe's lower lip trembled. But I don't want to do the puzzle anymore. Can't we just play something else? Violet felt a familiar surge of frustration. In her world, tasks were completed, goals were met, and timelines were adhered to. The idea of simply abandoning a project midway was alien to her, but as she opened her mouth to insist, she caught sight of their reflection in the living room window. She saw herself back ramrod straight, brow furrowed in concentration, next to Zoe's small, slumped figure. The contrast was stark, and it made Violet pause. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to relax. You know what, sweetheart? You're right. We don't have to finish the puzzle right now. What would you like to play instead? The smile that lit up Zoe's face was worth more than any successfully completed project. As the days passed, Violet found herself slowly but surely adapting to this new life. She learned to find joy in the small moments. Zoe's delighted giggle when they built a pillow fort in the living room, the look of concentration on her face as she carefully colored inside the lines, the way she snuggled close during their nightly story time. One evening, as Violet tucked Zoe into bed, the little girl asked a question that caught her off guard. Grandma, do you miss your old job? Violet paused, considering her answer carefully. Sometimes I do, she admitted. It was a big part of my life for a very long time. But you know what? What? Zoe asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. I wouldn't trade this time with you for anything in the world. Zoe's face broke into a smile. I'm glad you're here, Grandma. I love you. The words, so simple yet so profound, brought tears to Violet's eyes. I love you too, sweetheart, more than you could ever know. As she left Zoe's room that night, Violet felt a sense of peace wash over her. Yes, there were still challenges ahead. The business world hadn't forgotten her, and she knew that eventually she would need to address her future with Whitmore Industries. But for now, in this moment, she was exactly where she needed to be. The true turning point came on a rainy Saturday afternoon. Violet had planned a trip to the museum, but the downpour had forced them to stay indoors. As she racked her brain for indoor activities, Zoe tugged on her hand. Grandma, can we bake cookies? Like the ones Mommy used to make? Violet felt a moment of panic. Baking had never been her strong suit. Her idea of cooking was ordering from the city's finest restaurants, but the hopeful look in Zoe's eyes made it impossible to say no. Of course we can, sweetheart. Why don't you show me how? What followed was a chaotic flour-covered adventure. Zoe, it turned out, had a remarkable memory for her mother's baking process, even if she didn't quite understand the measurements. Violet found herself following the instructions of a 4-year-old, measuring a bit of this and a lot of that. As they worked, Zoe began to open up, sharing memories of baking with her mother. Violet listened intently, her heart aching for the moments she had missed, but grateful for this chance to connect with her granddaughter. When the cookies finally came out of the oven, they were far from perfect. Some were burnt around the edges, others were oddly shaped. But as Violet bit into one, the warm chocolate melting on her tongue, she couldn't remember ever tasting anything better. "We did it, Grandma!" Zoe exclaimed, her face lit up with joy. "They taste just like Mommy's." In that moment, covered in flour and chocolate smears, Violet felt a surge of emotion so strong it nearly overwhelmed her. This, she realized, was what truly mattered. Not stock prices or board meetings, but these precious moments of connection and love. As they sat together, enjoying their imperfect cookies and listening to the rain outside, Violet knew that her life had irrevocably changed. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, she was perfectly okay with that. The cookie incident, as Violet came to think of it, marked a turning point in her relationship with Zoe. The little girl began to open up more, sharing stories about her parents and her life before the accident. Violet treasured each revelation, each memory shared, like the precious gifts they were. But as Zoe blossomed, the outside world continued to intrude. Violet couldn't entirely escape her old life, nor did she want to. She still received regular updates from Richard about the company's performance, and she found herself offering advice and insights, albeit from a distance. One afternoon, as Violet was helping Zoe with a particularly challenging jigsaw puzzle, her phone rang. It was Richard, and from the tone of his voice, she could tell it was important. "Violet, I'm sorry to bother you, but we have a situation," Richard said, his voice tense. "The green energy initiative is falling apart. The main investor is threatening to pull out, and if they do, the whole project could collapse." Violet felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, the kind she used to get before a big negotiation. "What happened, Richard? Last I heard, everything was on track." As Richard explained the complications, a mix of regulatory hurdles and last-minute demands from the investor, Violet found her mind automatically shifting into problem-solving mode. She was about to suggest a strategy when she felt a small tug on her sleeve. She looked down to see Zoe watching her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Just a moment, Richard," Violet said, covering the phone's microphone. She turned to Zoe, softening her voice. "Sweetheart, Grandma needs to take this call. It's important for the company. Will you be okay playing by yourself for a little while?" Zoe nodded, but Violet could see the disappointment in her eyes. It was a look she had seen too often in Jonathan's eyes when he was young, when work had taken precedence over family time. In that moment, Violet made a decision that surprised even herself. "Actually, Richard," she said, returning to the call, "I'm in the middle of something important right now. Can you email me the details, and I'll look them over this evening after Zoe's gone to bed?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Are you sure, Violet? This is pretty time-sensitive." "I'm sure," Violet said firmly. "I trust you to handle things until then. You're more than capable." As she hung up, Violet felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She turned back to Zoe, who was looking at her with wide eyes. "Now, where were we with this puzzle?" Violet asked, settling back down on the floor. Zoe's face broke into a radiant smile. "You stayed," she said softly, almost in wonder. Violet felt her heart constrict. "Of course I stayed, sweetheart. You're my priority now." As they worked on the puzzle together, Violet found herself fully present in a way she rarely had been before. She listened intently as Zoe chatted about the picture they were assembling, asking questions and offering encouragement. The ringing of her phone went ignored, emails piled up unread, but for once, Violet didn't feel the usual anxiety about being disconnected from work. Later that night, after Zoe had gone to bed, Violet sat down at her computer to review the situation Richard had called about. As she read through the emails and reports, she found her mind clearer than it had been in years. The solution to the problem seemed obvious now, a simple restructuring of the deal that would satisfy all parties. She quickly drafted an email to Richard outlining her proposed strategy, then sat back, a small smile playing on her lips. She had always prided herself on her ability to see the big picture, to find solutions where others saw only problems, but now she realized she had been missing the biggest picture of all. The next morning, as Violet was making breakfast, she had graduated from burnt pancakes to slightly overcooked but edible ones, her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Your plan worked perfectly. The investor is back on board, and the green energy initiative is moving forward." "How do you do it?" Violet chuckled, typing out a reply. "Sometimes you need to step back to see the whole puzzle. Give yourself a raise, Richard. You've earned it." As she set the phone down, Zoe padded into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Good morning, Grandma," she yawned. "Good morning, sweetheart," Violet replied, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the stove. "How about we have a picnic in the park today?" Zoe's eyes lit up. "Really? Can we feed the ducks again?" "Of course we can," Violet smiled. "And maybe afterwards we can bake some more cookies. I think I'm starting to get the hang of it." As Zoe cheered and ran off to get dressed, Violet found herself marveling at how much her life had changed in such a short time. The woman she had been just a few months ago would hardly recognize her now. But as she heard Zoe's delighted laughter echoing through the apartment, she knew she wouldn't have it any other way. The Ice Queen had melted, it was true, but in her place was someone stronger, someone more whole, someone who understood that true success couldn't be measured in stock prices or profit margins, but in the love and trust of a little girl who had lost everything and found a home in her grandmother's heart. As Violet packed a picnic basket, humming softly to herself, she realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving or succeeding. She was truly living. And it was the most exhilarating challenge she had ever taken on. The crisp autumn air nipped at Violet's cheeks as she stood outside Zoe's new elementary school, her hand clasped tightly around her granddaughter's smaller one. The schoolyard bustled with activity, children laughing, parents calling out last-minute reminders, teachers corralling their charges towards the building. Violet felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach, an unfamiliar sensation for a woman who had faced down corporate raiders and hostile takeovers without breaking a sweat. But this was different. This was Zoe's first day of kindergarten, and Violet was terrified. "Remember, sweetheart," Violet said, kneeling down to Zoe's level, "if you need anything at all, you can ask your teacher to call me. I'll be here in a heartbeat." Zoe nodded, her brown eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "I know, Grandma, you promised." Violet smiled, tucking a stray curl behind Zoe's ear. "That's right. And Grandma always keeps her promises, doesn't she?" "Always," Zoe agreed solemnly. As the bell rang and Zoe joined the line of children filing into the school, Violet felt a lump form in her throat. She watched until the last curly head disappeared through the doors, then turned to walk back to her car, only to find herself face to face with a familiar figure. "Well, well," Catherine Blakely said, a smirk playing on her lips. The great Violet Whitmore, reduced to school drop-offs. How the mighty have fallen. Violet straightened her spine, old instincts kicking in. "Catherine, I didn't realize your grandchildren attended this school." "Oh, they don't." Catherine waved a hand dismissively. "I'm here for a meeting with the principal. We're discussing a potential donation for a new STEM lab." She paused, her eyes glinting with challenge. "I suppose you're not involved in those sorts of things anymore, are you?" For a moment, Violet felt a familiar surge of competitiveness. The old Violet would have immediately pulled out her checkbook, determined to outdo Catherine's donation. But as she opened her mouth to respond, she caught sight of a small girl with pigtails, clutching her mother's hand and looking terrified. In that moment, Violet remembered why she was really here. "You're right, Catherine," Violet said, her voice calm. "I'm not involved in those things anymore. My priorities have changed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a very important appointment with a plate of cookies and a first day of school banner to hang up." As she walked away, leaving a stunned Catherine in her wake, Violet felt a sense of lightness. The old need to compete, to always be on top, was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She had bigger things to worry about now. The first few weeks of school brought a whirlwind of new experiences and challenges. Violet found herself navigating a world of parent-teacher meetings, school projects, and playground politics. It was a far cry from the boardrooms and business deals she was used to, but she approached it with the same determination and attention to detail. One evening, as Violet was helping Zoe with a particularly challenging art project involving macaroni and glitter, who knew kindergarten could be so messy, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Richard. "Violet," he said, his voice tense. "I hate to bother you, but we've hit a snag with the Green Energy Initiative. The environmental impact report came back with some concerns, and our major investor is getting cold feet. We could really use your input on this." Violet glanced at Zoe, who was concentrating hard on gluing macaroni to her paper in the shape of a flower. She felt the familiar pull of the business world, the adrenaline rush of a crisis to be solved. But then Zoe looked up, smiled at her, and the decision was easy. "I'm sorry, Richard," Violet said, "but I'm in the middle of an important project right now. Email me the details and I'll look them over after bedtime. I trust you to handle things until then." As she hung up, Violet realized that a few months ago, she would have dropped everything for a call like that. Now sitting on the floor covered in glitter and helping her granddaughter create a macaroni masterpiece felt infinitely more important. "Grandma," Zoe said, holding up her artwork, "do you think Mommy and Daddy would like this?" Violet felt a lump form in her throat. "They would love it, sweetheart. In fact, why don't we hang it up right here in the living room so we can see it every day?" Zoe beamed, and Violet felt a warmth spread through her chest. This, she realized, was what real success felt like. However, not all challenges were so easily overcome. As the weeks passed, Violet found herself facing scrutiny from an unexpected source: the child welfare system. It started with a routine check-in, a standard procedure for cases like Zoe's, but as the social worker, a kind-faced woman named Ms. Martinez, sat in Violet's living room asking questions, Violet felt a growing sense of unease. "Ms. Whitmore," "Ms." Martinez said, her pen poised over her notepad, "can you walk me through a typical day with Zoe?" Violet straightened, falling back on her old habits of poise and precision. "Of course. We wake up at 7 a.m. I prepare breakfast while Zoe gets dressed. We eat together, then I drive her to school. While she's at school, I handle any necessary business matters from my home office. I pick her up at 3 p.m., we have a snack, and then we usually do an activity together, reading, art projects, or playing in the park. Dinner is at 6 p.m., followed by bath time and a bedtime story." Ms. Martinez nodded, jotting notes. "And what about your work with Whitmore Industries? I understand you've taken a leave of absence, but surely there are still demands on your time?" Violet felt a flicker of defensiveness. "I've significantly reduced my involvement in the day-to-day operations of the company. Zoe is my priority now." "I see," Ms. Martinez said, her tone neutral. "And how are you finding the adjustment? It must be quite a change from running a multi-billion-dollar corporation to caring for a 5-year-old. The question hit a nerve. Violet found herself thinking of the sleepless nights, the moments of frustration and self-doubt, the times when she felt completely out of her depth. But she also thought of Zoe's laughter, the joy of watching her granddaughter grow and heal, the indescribable feeling of being needed and loved unconditionally. "It's been an adjustment," Violet admitted, "but it's also been the most rewarding experience of my life." Ms. Martinez's expression softened slightly. "That's wonderful to hear, Ms. Whitmore. However, I do have to ask, have you considered long-term plans? Zoe will eventually need more than just one-on-one care. She'll need a stable environment with opportunities for socialization and growth." Violet felt a chill run down her spine. "What exactly are you suggesting, Ms. Martinez?" The social worker sighed. "I'm not suggesting anything at the moment, Ms. Whitmore. I'm simply trying to ensure that Zoe's best interests are being served. Given your background and the sudden change in your lifestyle, we need to be thorough in our assessment." As Ms. Martinez left, promising to be in touch for follow-up visits, Violet found herself shaken. The idea that anyone could question her ability to care for Zoe, that there was even a possibility of Zoe being taken away, was terrifying. That night, after Zoe was asleep, Violet sat in her home office staring at the wall of accolades and awards from her business career. They seemed hollow now, meaningless in the face of this new challenge. She picked up her phone, her finger hovering over Richard's number. How easy it would be to call him, to dive back into the familiar world of business, where she knew she excelled. But then her eyes fell on a new addition to her desk, a framed macaroni art piece, pride of place among the business awards, and she knew what she had to do. The next few weeks saw Violet throwing herself into parenting with the same intensity she had once applied to hostile takeovers. She researched child development theories, joined parent groups, and even enrolled in a child psychology course at the local community college. One evening, as she was poring over a textbook on childhood trauma, Zoe padded into the room, clutching her stuffed elephant. "Grandma," she said softly, "can we have a tea party?" Violet looked up, seeing the hopeful expression on Zoe's face. She glanced at her textbook, then back at Zoe, and made a decision. "Of course we can, sweetheart," she said, closing the book. "In fact, why don't we invite Mr. Elephant too?" As they sat on the floor, sipping imaginary tea from tiny plastic cups, Violet felt a sense of peace wash over her. All the research in the world couldn't compare to these moments of connection. "Grandma," Zoe said suddenly, her voice serious, "are you happy?" The question caught Violet off guard. "Of course I am, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" Zoe shrugged, fiddling with her cup. "Sometimes you look sad when you think I'm not looking. Is it because of me, because I'm not mommy or daddy?" Violet felt her heart break a little. She set down her cup and pulled Zoe into her lap. "Oh, sweetheart, no. It's not because of you at all. Sometimes I'm sad because I miss your mommy and daddy too. And sometimes I worry about doing the right things for you. But I want you to know something very important." She tilted Zoe's chin up, looking into her eyes. "You make me happier than I've ever been. Taking care of you isn't a burden, it's a gift. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Zoe." Zoe's eyes welled up with tears, and she threw her arms around Violet's neck. "I love you, Grandma," she whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart," Violet replied, her own eyes misting over, "more than you could ever know." As they sat there holding each other, Violet realized something. She had spent her entire life striving for success, for recognition, for power, but none of it compared to this, the simple, profound joy of being loved and needed by this little girl. The next day, Violet received another visit from Ms. Martinez. This time, however, she was ready. "Ms. Martinez," Violet said, gesturing for the social worker to take a seat, "before we begin, I'd like to show you something." She handed over a thick binder filled with detailed plans and schedules. "This is my long-term plan for Zoe's care and development. You'll find information on her education plan, including enrichment activities and socialization opportunities. There's also a section on how I'm addressing her emotional needs, including regular sessions with a child psychologist specializing in grief counseling." Ms. Martinez looked surprised as she flipped through the binder. "This is very thorough, Ms. Whitmore." "Of course it is," Violet said, her voice firm. "Zoe deserves nothing less than my absolute best effort. I may be new to full-time parenting, but I assure you, I approach it with the same dedication and attention to detail that made me successful in business." Just then, Zoe burst into the room, her face alight with excitement. "Grandma, Grandma, look what I made in school today." She thrust a piece of paper into Violet's hands. It was a drawing of two figures, one tall with silver hair, one small with curly hair, holding hands. Above them, Zoe had carefully printed "My Family." Violet felt her eyes well up with tears. She looked at Ms. Martinez, who was watching the interaction with a softened expression. "This," Violet said, her voice thick with emotion, "this is why I do it. This is why I left behind a world I knew to step into one I didn't. Because Zoe needed me, and I needed her. We're a family, Ms. Martinez. Not a conventional one, perhaps, but a family nonetheless." Ms. Martinez nodded slowly, a smile playing on her lips. "I can see that, Ms. Whitmore, and I have to say I'm impressed. You've clearly put a lot of thought and effort into this." As Ms. Martinez left, promising a positive report, Violet felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She turned to Zoe, who was looking up at her with curious eyes. "Grandma," Zoe said, "can we go to the park? I want to show you how high I can swing now." Violet smiled, taking Zoe's hand. "That sounds perfect, sweetheart. Let's go." As they walked to the park, Violet reflecting on how much her life had changed. The challenges weren't over. Raising a child, especially one who had been through so much, would always bring new obstacles. But for the first time in her life, Violet felt truly fulfilled. She watched as Zoe ran ahead, her curls bouncing in the sunlight, and felt a surge of love so strong it almost overwhelmed her. This, she realized, was her legacy. Not the buildings with her name on them, not the awards gathering dust on her shelf, but this little girl who called her Grandma and looked at her with trust and love. Violet Whitmore, once known as the Ice Queen of the business world, had melted, and in her place stood a woman who had discovered that the greatest success of all was measured not in dollars and cents, but in the laughter of a child and the warmth of unconditional love. As Zoe called out to her from the swings, Violet quickened her pace, eager to join in the simple joy of a day in the park with her granddaughter. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as a family. The autumn leaves crunched under Violet's feet as she walked hand in hand with Zoe through Lincoln Park. The crisp air carried the scent of approaching winter, and the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was a beautiful, peaceful evening, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Violet's mind. "Grandma," Zoe's voice broke through her thoughts, "can we feed the ducks before we go home?" Violet smiled down at her granddaughter, marveling at how much she'd grown in the past few months. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's go see if Mr. Quackers and his family are at the pond." As they approached the pond, Violet's phone buzzed in her pocket. She hesitated, then pulled it out, seeing a message from her lawyer, David Kensington. "Custody hearing date set, 2 weeks from today. Be prepared." Violet felt her heart drop. She'd known this day was coming, but seeing it in black and white made it real in a way she hadn't been prepared for. The child welfare system, despite Ms. Martinez's positive reports, had decided that a formal hearing was necessary to determine Zoe's long-term placement. "Grandma?" Zoe tugged on her hand. "Are you okay? You look sad." Violet quickly pocketed her phone and forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about some grown-up stuff. Now, let's see about those ducks, shall we?" As they tossed breadcrumbs to the eager ducks, Violet's mind raced. She had 2 weeks to prove that she, a 64-year-old former CEO with no prior parenting experience, was the best person to raise a traumatized 5-year-old. The odds seemed stacked against her. That night, after tucking Zoe into bed, Violet sat in her home office surrounded by legal documents and child psychology books. She picked up a framed photo from her desk, a candid shot of her and Zoe at the zoo, both laughing as they watched the penguins waddle by. The joy in both their faces was undeniable. "I won't lose you," Violet whispered to the picture. "I can't." The next morning, Violet woke with a sense of purpose. She had a plan, but it would require calling in some favors and stepping back into a world she'd left behind. "Diane," she said into her phone, "it's Violet. I need your help with something important." Over the next few days, Violet's penthouse became a hub of activity. Diane, her former assistant, coordinated a team of researchers and child development experts. Richard, despite his initial surprise at her request, threw the full weight of Whitmore Industries' resources behind her efforts. "Grandma?" Zoe asked one evening, peering curiously at the bustling adults in the living room. "What's going on? Are we having a party?" Violet knelt down to Zoe's level, taking her small hands in her own. "Not exactly, sweetheart. You remember Ms. Martinez and how she comes to check on us sometimes?" Zoe nodded, her brow furrowing. "Is she coming again? Did I do something wrong?" No, darling," Violet assured her quickly. "You've done nothing wrong. It's just, there are some people who want to make sure that I'm doing a good job taking care of you. So we're going to have a special meeting to show them how well we're doing together." Zoe's eyes widened. "But you are doing a good job. You're the best grandma ever." Violet felt her heart swell with love and determination. "Thank you, sweetheart, and you know what? I think you're the best granddaughter ever. Now how about we show these people just how great we are together?" The day of the hearing arrived all too quickly. Violet stood in front of her full-length mirror, adjusting her suit, not the power suits of her CEO days, but a softer, more approachable ensemble that still exuded confidence. "You've got this," she told her reflection, trying to quell the butterflies in her stomach. "You faced down corporate raiders and hostile takeovers. You can handle a custody hearing." But as she helped Zoe into her favorite dress, the one with sunflowers that Claire had bought her, Violet knew that this was different. This wasn't just about winning or losing. This was about family, about love, about giving Zoe the stability and care she deserved. The courthouse was intimidating, its stone facade looming over them as they climbed the steps. Zoe clutched Violet's hand tightly, her eyes wide as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. "It's okay, sweetheart," Violet reassured her, squeezing her hand. "I'm right here with you." Inside, they were met by David Kensington, Violet's lawyer. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low. Violet nodded, her jaw set with determination. "Let's do this." The courtroom was smaller than Violet had expected, but no less imposing. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, peered down at them from her bench. Ms. Martinez sat at a table to one side, her face unreadable. As the hearing began, Violet listened as the state presented its case. They spoke of her age, her lack of parenting experience, the demands of her former career. Each word felt like a blow, but Violet held her head high, reminding herself of the bond she and Zoe had forged. When it was her turn to speak, Violet stood, smoothing down her suit jacket. She took a deep breath, then began. "Your Honor, I stand before you not as Violet Whitmore, former CEO of Whitmore Industries, but as Violet Whitmore, grandmother and guardian to Zoe Whitmore. I won't deny that when Zoe first came into my care, I was unprepared. I had spent my life in boardrooms, not playrooms. I knew more about quarterly reports than bedtime stories. She paused, looking over at Zoe, who was watching her with wide, trusting eyes. But in these past months, I've learned more about love, patience, and true success than I did in all my years in business. I've learned that a child's laughter is worth more than any stock option, that a crayon drawing is more valuable than any contract. Violet turned back to the judge, her voice strong and clear. I know I'm not a conventional choice. I'm older than most guardians, and my experience is unconventional. But I would argue that this makes me uniquely qualified to care for Zoe. I have the financial means to provide for her every need. I have the flexibility to devote myself entirely to her care and development. And most importantly, I have the life experience to guide her through both joys and sorrows. She gestured to the team seated behind her. I've brought with me today a comprehensive plan for Zoe's care. It includes educational strategies, emotional support systems, and long-term development goals. But more than that, I've brought evidence of the bond Zoe and I have formed. At this, David stood and approached the bench with a tablet. Your Honor, if I may, we've prepared a short video presentation. The judge nodded, and the lights dimmed. On the screen, images and video clips began to play. Violet and Zoe baking cookies, flour on their noses as they laughed together. Violet reading a bedtime story, doing different voices for each character as Zoe giggled. The two of them at the park, Violet pushing Zoe on the swings, both their faces alight with joy. But it was the final clip that brought tears to Violet's eyes. It showed Zoe sitting at the kitchen table, drawing. The camera zoomed in on her picture, a family portrait. There was Zoe, and next to her, unmistakable with her silver hair, was Violet. Above them, floating in the sky like angels, were two figures Violet recognized as Jonathan and Claire. In the video, Violet's voice could be heard asking, "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" Zoe looked up, her face serious. "It's our family, Grandma. See? There's you and me, and Mommy and Daddy are watching over us from heaven." The video, Violet's voice cracked as she asked, "And are you happy, Zoe?" Zoe nodded emphatically. "I miss Mommy and Daddy, but I'm happy with you, Grandma. You make the sad go away." As the video ended and the lights came back up, Violet could see that she wasn't the only one affected. The judge was blinking rapidly, and even Ms. Martinez seemed moved. Violet turned back to the judge, her voice thick with emotion. "Your Honor, I'm not perfect. I'm still learning every day how to be the guardian Zoe needs. But I love her with every fiber of my being, and I am committed to giving her the best life possible. We may not be a conventional family, but we are a family nonetheless." She took a deep breath, steadying herself for her final words. "I'm asking you today not just to grant me custody of Zoe, but to give us the chance to continue healing together, to continue growing together. Because the truth is, Your Honor, Zoe hasn't just changed my life. She's saved it. She's given me a purpose and a love I never knew I was missing. Please don't take that away from either of us." As Violet sat down, she felt Zoe's small hand slip into hers. She looked down to see her granddaughter smiling up at her, and in that moment, regardless of the outcome, Violet knew she had already won the most important battle. She had won Zoe's love and trust. The judge called a recess to review all the evidence. As they waited in the hallway, Violet knelt down in front of Zoe. "Sweetheart, no matter what happens in there, I want you to know something," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I love you more than anything in this world. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and nothing will ever change that." Zoe threw her arms around Violet's neck. "I love you too, Grandma. Can we go home now?" Violet chuckled softly, hugging Zoe tight. "Soon, sweetheart. We just have to wait a little longer." When they were called back into the courtroom, Violet's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She held Zoe's hand tightly as they stood before the judge. The judge looked at them over her glasses, her expression unreadable. "Ms. Whitmore, I've reviewed all the evidence presented today, as well as the reports from Child Services. I've considered the unconventional nature of your situation, as well as the clear bond you formed with Zoe." She paused, and Violet felt as though the whole world was holding its breath. "It's clear to me," the judge continued, "that despite the challenges, you have provided Zoe with a stable, loving home. Your dedication to her well-being is evident in every action you've taken. Therefore, it is the decision of this court to grant you full legal guardianship of Zoe Whitmore." The words took a moment to sink in. When they did, Violet felt a wave of emotion so strong it nearly knocked her off her feet. She turned to Zoe, who was looking up at her with a mixture of confusion and hope. "We did it, sweetheart," Violet said, her voice choked with tears. "We're going home. Together." Zoe's face broke into a radiant smile, and she launched herself into Violet's arms. As Violet held her granddaughter close, she felt a sense of peace and rightness that she had never experienced before. The next few hours passed in a blur of paperwork and congratulations. As they finally walked out of the courthouse hand in hand, Violet felt as though she was floating. "Grandma," Zoe said as they reached the car, "are you happy?" Violet knelt down, looking into Zoe's eyes. "Sweetheart, I've never been happier in my entire life. How about you? Are you happy?" Zoe nodded, then her face grew serious. "Grandma, can I tell you something?" "Of course, darling. You can tell me anything." Zoe took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for something big. I remember the day Mommy and Daddy left. They hugged me really tight and said they loved me. And Daddy said that if anything happened, you would take care of me. He said you were the strongest person he knew." Violet felt her breath catch in her throat. This was the first time Zoe had spoken about that day. "And you know what?" Zoe continued, her voice growing stronger. "He was right. You are strong, Grandma, and brave, and you make me feel safe." Tears spilled down Violet's cheeks as she pulled Zoe into a tight hug. "Oh, sweetheart, you make me strong. You make me brave. We make each other better." As they drove home, Violet couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. From the devastated, silent child Zoe had been to the smiling, chattering girl beside her now. From the cold, career-focused woman she had been to the warm, loving grandmother she had become. "Grandma?" Zoe's voice broke through her thoughts. "Can we have a celebration dinner with ice cream?" Violet laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Absolutely, sweetheart. In fact, why don't we make the ice cream ourselves? I think it's time I learned how to use that ice cream maker your dad bought me years ago." As they pulled into their driveway, Violet saw something that made her heart swell. Their neighbors, the same ones who had once whispered about the Ice Queen trying to raise a child, had hung a banner across their front porch. In bright, cheerful letters, it read, "Welcome home, Violet and Zoe." Zoe gasped in delight. "Look, Grandma, they're happy for us too." Violet felt a lump form in her throat. "Yes, sweetheart, it looks like we have a whole community rooting for us." As they walked up to their front door, Violet realized something profound. She had spent her entire life chasing success, thinking it would bring her happiness. But true happiness, true success, had found her in the most unexpected way, through love, through family, through the little girl holding her hand. The Ice Queen had not just melted, she had been reborn, and this new Violet, this grandmother, this guardian, this protector of a young heart, was the best version of herself she had ever been. As Zoe skipped into the house, already chattering about which flavor of ice cream they should make, Violet paused in the doorway. She looked up at the sky, imagining Jonathan and Claire smiling down at them. "We're okay," she whispered. "We're more than okay. We're home." With that, she stepped inside, closing the door on her old life and embracing the beautiful, chaotic, love-filled future that awaited her. The future she would build, day by day, moment by moment, with Zoe by her side. The ice cream-making adventure that followed was a perfect metaphor for their journey together. Messy, unpredictable, filled with laughter and the occasional tears, mostly when Violet accidentally added salt instead of sugar to the first batch. But in the end, as they sat on the couch eating slightly lumpy but delicious homemade strawberry ice cream, Violet knew that this moment, this life, was the sweetest success she had ever tasted. "Grandma," Zoe said, her face smeared with ice cream, "can we do this every day?" Violet chuckled, wiping Zoe's chin with a napkin. "Maybe not every day, sweetheart, but how about we make it our special celebration treat? Whenever we have something to celebrate, we'll make ice cream together." Zoe's eyes lit up. "Like birthdays?" "Absolutely." "And Christmas?" "Of course." Zoe paused, thinking hard. "What about Tuesdays?" Violet laughed, pulling Zoe into a hug. "Nice try, clever girl. How about this? Every Sunday we'll have a special grandmother-granddaughter day. We can make ice cream or cookies or try something new, whatever we want to do together. Promise?" Zoe held out her pinky finger solemnly. Violet linked her pinky with Zoe's, her heart full to bursting. "I promise, sweetheart. It's you and me together, always." As they settled in to watch a movie, Zoe curled up against Violet's side. Violet found herself thinking about the future. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt. School plays and skinned knees, first crushes and broken hearts, triumphs and failures. But she was ready for all of it. She had faced down corporate raiders and navigated global markets. She had built an empire from the ground up. But this, raising Zoe, being a family, this was her greatest challenge and her greatest joy. It would require all of her skills, her strategic thinking, her determination, her ability to adapt and learn. But it would also open her heart in ways she never thought possible. As the movie played, Violet found her mind drifting to the family photo album she had started. It was filled with pictures of their adventures together. Zoe's first day of school, their attempts at baking, trips to the zoo and the park. But there was one photo that held a special place in her heart. It was a simple snapshot, taken by a kind stranger at the duck pond. Violet and Zoe were kneeling by the water, tossing breadcrumbs to the ducks. But what made the photo special was the way they were looking at each other. Violet with a mixture of love and wonder, Zoe with pure adoration. It captured perfectly the bond they had formed, the family they had become. Violet made a mental note to have that photo framed. It would be a perfect addition to her desk at home, a reminder of what truly mattered in life. As the credits rolled on the movie, Violet looked down to find Zoe fast asleep, her head resting on Violet's lap. Carefully, so as not to wake her, Violet scooped her up and carried her to bed. As she tucked Zoe in, smoothing back her curls and placing a gentle kiss on her forehead, Violet whispered, "Sweet dreams, my little one. Grandma loves you." Back in the living room, Violet picked up her phone, seeing a missed call from Richard. She hesitated for a moment, then called him back. "Violet," Richard answered, his voice a mixture of concern and curiosity. "How did it go?" "We won, Richard," Violet said, her voice soft but filled with joy. "Zoe's officially mine." "That's wonderful news," Richard exclaimed. "I knew you could do it. So, does this mean you'll be coming back to the company soon? The board has been asking—" Violet took a deep breath. This was a conversation she knew was coming, but she had been putting it off. Now, with the custody hearing behind them and their future secure, it was time to face it. "Richard," she began, "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About the company, about my life, about what's truly important." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Go on," Richard said, his voice cautious. "I've decided. I'm not coming back. Not in the same capacity, at least." "Violet, are you sure? The company needs you. We've managed to keep things running, but without you at the helm—" "The company will be fine, Richard," Violet said firmly. "You've done an excellent job as interim CEO. I think it's time we made that position permanent." "Me?" Richard sounded shocked. "But Violet, this company is your legacy." Violet smiled, looking at the family photos on her mantle. "No, Richard, Whitmore Industries was my life's work, but it's not my legacy. My legacy is currently asleep in her bed, dreaming of ice cream and ducks. The company will always be a part of me, and I'll be happy to consult or offer advice when needed, but my full-time job now is being a grandmother." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "I understand, Violet, and for what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. Zoe is lucky to have you." "Thank you, Richard. I'm the lucky one, believe me." After ending the call, Violet walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city lights twinkled in the distance, a reminder of the world she had once dominated. But as she turned back to look at the cozy living room, with its scattered toys and crayon drawings on the fridge, she knew she had found something far more valuable than any corporate success. She had found home. She had found family. She had found love. As Violet prepared for bed, she paused by Zoe's room, peeking in to check on her. The little girl was sound asleep, her stuffed elephant clutched tightly to her chest. In the soft glow of the nightlight, Violet could see the peaceful smile on Zoe's face. "Good night, my little love," Violet whispered. "Tomorrow is the first day of the rest of our lives together, and I can't wait to see what adventures it brings." With that, Violet closed the door softly and headed to her own room, her heart full and her spirit at peace. The Ice Queen had melted, replaced by a woman who had discovered that the warmth of love was the greatest power of all. And as she drifted off to sleep, Violet Whitmore, former CEO and now full-time grandmother, knew that she had finally found her true calling. In the giggles of a little girl, in the messy art projects and bedtime stories, in the challenges and joys of everyday life, she had found a success greater than any she had ever known in the boardroom. She had found the greatest adventure of all, the adventure of family, of love, of watching a child grow and helping to shape her future. And she couldn't wait to see where this new journey would take them. The early morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Violet's penthouse, casting a warm glow over the kitchen. Violet stood at the stove, carefully flipping pancakes, her silver hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. The sound of small feet padding down the hallway made her smile. "Good morning, sleepyhead," Violet called out as Zoe appeared, rubbing her eyes and clutching her stuffed elephant. "Morning, Grandma," Zoe yawned, climbing onto a stool at the kitchen island. "Are those blueberry pancakes?" Violet nodded, sliding a plate in front of her granddaughter. "Your favorite. Big day today, remember?" Zoe's eyes lit up as she remembered. The foundation opening. It had been 6 months since the custody hearing, and life had settled into a new, wonderful rhythm for Violet and Zoe. The transition hadn't been without its challenges, but each day brought new joys and deepened their bond. As they ate breakfast together, Violet marveled at how much Zoe had grown, not just physically but emotionally. The quiet, withdrawn child she had first taken in was now a bubbly, curious 6-year-old who greeted each day with enthusiasm. "Grandma," Zoe said between bites, "will there be other kids at the foundation today?" Violet nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. Remember how we talked about the foundation helping other children who've lost their parents? Some of them will be there today." The Whitmore Family Foundation had been Violet's brainchild, born from her experiences with Zoe. It was dedicated to supporting children who had lost parents, providing resources for their caregivers, and funding research into childhood grief and trauma. Today was the grand opening of their first family center in Chicago. As they got ready for the day, Violet helped Zoe into a pretty blue dress that brought out her eyes. "Shall you look beautiful, sweetheart?" Violet said, smoothing down Zoe's curls. Zoe beamed up at her. "You look pretty too, Grandma, like a princess." Violet chuckled, looking down at her tailored suit. It was similar to what she used to wear in her CEO days, but softer somehow, more approachable, just like she had become. The drive to the foundation's new building was filled with Zoe's excited chatter. As they pulled up, Violet saw a crowd gathered outside, families, reporters, and to her surprise, some familiar faces from her business days. "Violet," Richard called out as they approached. He looked different, more relaxed, but still sharp in his suit. "And Miss Zoe, don't you look lovely?" Zoe grinned up at him. "Hi, Mr. Richard. Are you here to see Grandma's new job?" Richard laughed. "I certainly am. Your grandmother is doing amazing things here." As they made their way inside, Violet was stopped by numerous well-wishers and old acquaintances. She introduced Zoe proudly, watching as her granddaughter charmed everyone she met. The ceremony itself was a blur of speeches and ribbon cutting. Violet found herself at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, some familiar, many new. She saw families like hers, grandparents and aunts and uncles who had stepped up to care for children who had lost so much. She saw hope in their eyes, and it strengthened her resolve. "When I lost my son and daughter-in-law," Violet began, her voice steady, "I thought my world had ended. But then I looked into the eyes of my granddaughter, and I saw a future I never knew I wanted, a future filled with love, challenges, and more joy than I ever thought possible." She paused, finding Zoe in the crowd. The little girl gave her a thumbs up, making Violet smile. This foundation is born from that love. It's a promise to all the children out there who have lost so much, and to all the caregivers who have opened their hearts and homes. We're here to support you, to guide you, and to remind you that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who God puts in your life for a reason. As applause filled the room, Violet stepped down from the podium. Zoe ran up to her, throwing her arms around Violet's waist. "You did great, Grandma," Zoe exclaimed. "Can we go see the playroom now?" Violet laughed, taking Zoe's hand. "Of course, sweetheart, let's go explore." The family center was a marvel. There were counseling rooms for both children and adults, a state-of-the-art playroom designed to encourage healing through play, and a resource library filled with books on grief, parenting, and childhood development. But the heart of the center was a large, sunny room filled with comfortable seating and toys. "This is the family room," Violet explained to Zoe. "It's a place where families like ours can come to meet others, to share experiences, and to support each other." As they walked through the room, Violet noticed a young woman sitting alone, looking overwhelmed. She approached gently, Zoe at her side. "Hello," Violet said softly. "I'm Violet, and this is my granddaughter Zoe. Are you here for the opening?" The woman nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm Sarah. I just got custody of my nephew last month. His parents, there was an accident." Violet sat down next to her, placing a comforting hand on her arm. "I understand, Sarah, more than you know." As Violet shared her story with Sarah, she saw the young woman's shoulders relax, saw hope begin to spark in her eyes. Zoe, sensing the mood, climbed up next to Sarah and began to tell her about her favorite stuffed animal. By the time they left Sarah, she was smiling, clutching a handful of resources and the promise of ongoing support from the foundation. "Grandma," Zoe said as they walked away, "did we help that lady?" Violet squeezed Zoe's hand. "We did, sweetheart. And that's what this place is all about, helping people who are on the same journey we've been on." The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of introductions, tours, and heartfelt conversations. By the time they left, the sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Tired, sweetheart?" Violet asked, as Zoe yawned in the back seat. "A little," Zoe admitted, "but it was a good day." "I'm proud of you, Grandma." Violet felt her heart swell. "Thank you, darling, I'm proud of us." That night, after Zoe was tucked into bed, Violet sat in her study, looking over some final paperwork for the foundation. A soft knock at the door made her look up. "Grandma?" Zoe stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed elephant. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart, come here." Violet patted the seat next to her on the small sofa. Zoe climbed up, snuggling into Violet's side. "Do you think Mommy and Daddy would be happy about the foundation?" Violet felt a lump form in her throat. "Oh, darling, I think they would be very, very happy. Your daddy always wanted to help people, and your mommy had the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. I think they're looking down on us right now, smiling." Zoe was quiet for a moment, then looked up at Violet with serious eyes. "Grandma, I miss them a lot sometimes, but I'm really glad I have you. Is that okay?" Violet pulled Zoe close, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "Of course it's okay, sweetheart, I miss them too, but having you in my life, it's the greatest gift I've ever been given. You know that, right?" Zoe nodded, yawning again. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, my darling girl, more than all the stars in the sky." As Zoe drifted off to sleep in her arms, Violet reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. She thought of the woman she had been just a year ago. Successful, yes, but cold and alone. She thought of the challenges they had faced, the tears they had shed, the laughter they had shared. She thought of Jonathan and Claire, feeling their presence in every smile Zoe gave her, in every moment of joy and growth. They lived on in Zoe, in the foundation that bore their name, in the love that had blossomed between a grandmother and granddaughter thrown together by tragedy. Carefully, so as not to wake Zoe, Violet reached for her phone. She pulled up her email and began to type a message to Richard. "Richard, today was a reminder of why we made the right decision. The foundation is more than just a charitable endeavor. It's a legacy, a way to honor Jonathan and Claire, and a means to help others who are walking the path Zoe and I have traveled. I know there were doubts when I stepped down, concerns about the future of Whitmore Industries, but seeing you today, hearing about the company's continued success under your leadership, I know it was the right choice. The company is in good hands with you, just as Zoe is in good hands with me. Life has a funny way of showing us what truly matters. For years, I thought success was measured in profit margins and market shares. Now I know that true success is measured in the love we give, the lives we touch, and the difference we make in the world. Thank you for your continued support, both of the company and of my new endeavors. I hope you know how much it means to both Zoe and me. Here's to new beginnings and the journeys that lead us to where we're meant to be. Warm regards, Violet." As she hit send, Violet felt a sense of closure. The life she had known, the woman she had been, was well and truly in the past. But the future that stretched out before her was brighter and more fulfilling than she could have ever imagined. She looked down at Zoe, peaceful in sleep, and felt a wave of love wash over her. This was her world now, this child, this love, this new purpose, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Carefully, Violet stood, cradling Zoe in her arms. As she carried her granddaughter back to bed, she whispered a silent thank you to Jonathan and Claire, to the universe that had brought Zoe into her life, to whatever twist of fate had melted the heart of the Ice Queen and given her this second chance at love and family. Tucking Zoe in, Violet placed a gentle kiss on her forehead. "Sweet dreams, my little love," she murmured. "Tomorrow is another adventure." As she closed Zoe's door and headed to her own room, Violet felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead would have its challenges, she knew. Raising a child always did, but she was ready for them. Ready for the skinned knees and the homework struggles, the first crushes and the teenage rebellions. Ready for a lifetime of love and laughter, of growth and learning. She was ready for the greatest adventure of all, the adventure of family. Violet Whitmore, once the Ice Queen of the business world, now a devoted grandmother and philanthropist, slipped into bed with a smile on her face. As she drifted off to sleep, her last thoughts were of the little girl sleeping down the hall and of the beautiful future they would build together day by day, moment by moment. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect Chicago summer day. Violet woke early, as was her habit, but instead of immediately checking her emails or the stock market, she took a moment to simply breathe and appreciate the quiet of the morning. She padded softly to the kitchen, starting the coffee maker and pulling out ingredients for breakfast. As she whisked eggs for omelets, she heard the familiar sound of Zoe's feet on the hardwood floor. "Good morning, sunshine," Violet called out. "Sleep well?" Zoe appeared in the doorway, her curls a wild mess and her pajamas rumpled. "Morning, Grandma," she yawned, climbing onto a stool at the kitchen island. "What are we doing today?" Violet smiled, sliding a glass of orange juice towards her granddaughter. "Well, I thought we might go to the park this morning. Then this afternoon we have that meeting at your school about the fall semester. How does that sound?" Zoe nodded enthusiastically. "Can we feed the ducks at the park?" "Of course we can, sweetheart. We'll stop by the store and get some proper duck food on the way." As they ate breakfast together, Violet marveled at how natural this all felt now. A year ago, the idea of making omelets and planning park outings would have been foreign to her. Now it was the most normal thing in the world. After breakfast, as Violet helped Zoe get dressed, her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Saw your email. You're right. We're both exactly where we need to be. Give Zoe a hug from Uncle Richard." Violet smiled, showing the message to Zoe. "Look, sweetheart, Mr. Richard says hello." Zoe grinned. "Can we invite him for dinner sometime? He's funny." "That's a wonderful idea," Violet agreed. "We'll do that soon." As they walked hand in hand through Lincoln Park later that morning, Zoe skipping along and chattering about the ducks, Violet felt a profound sense of contentment. The park was filled with families, parents pushing strollers, grandparents helping toddlers on the playground, siblings chasing each other across the grass. They settled by the pond, Zoe carefully tossing handfuls of duck food into the water. Violet watched her, struck by how much she had grown and changed in the past year. "Grandma," Zoe said suddenly, turning to look at Violet with serious eyes. "Are you happy?" The question caught Violet off guard, but she didn't hesitate in her answer. "I'm happier than I've ever been in my life, sweetheart. Are you happy?" Zoe nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "I'm happy. I miss Mommy and Daddy sometimes, but I'm happy with you." Violet pulled Zoe into a hug, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "I'm so glad, my darling. You know, it's okay to be happy and still miss them. They'll always be a part of us." As they sat there by the pond, Violet found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. The pain and loss that had started it all, the challenges they had faced, the love that had grown between them. She thought of the foundation, of the families they were helping, of the legacy they were building in Jonathan and Claire's memory. She thought of Whitmore Industries thriving under Richard's leadership, freed from the shadow of the Ice Queen. And she thought of herself, the woman she had been and the woman she had become. The transformation wasn't just about softening her edges or learning to bake cookies. It was about opening her heart, about discovering a capacity for love and selflessness she never knew she possessed. "Grandma," Zoe's voice broke through her thoughts. "Can we get ice cream?" Violet laughed, standing up and brushing off her pants. "Ice cream before lunch? Your daddy would say I'm spoiling you." Zoe giggled. "But you're the grandma. Isn't that your job?" "You've got me there, clever girl." "All right, ice cream it is. But let's keep it our secret, okay? As they walked hand in hand towards the ice cream stand, Violet felt a warm breeze ruffle her hair. For a moment, just a moment, she could almost hear Jonathan's laughter on the wind, could almost see Claire's smile in the sunlight dappling through the trees. "Thank you," she whispered softly to the sky. "Thank you for her. Thank you for this second chance." "What did you say, Grandma?" Zoe asked, looking up curiously. Violet squeezed her hand gently. "Just thinking out loud, sweetheart. Now what flavor ice cream shall we get?" As Zoe launched into a detailed analysis of the merits of chocolate versus strawberry, Violet felt her heart swell with love. This was her life now. Ice cream debates and duck feeding, bedtime stories and foundation galas, skinned knees and triumph over math homework. It wasn't the life she had planned. It wasn't the success she had once chased. But it was so much more. It was love, pure and simple. It was family. It was home. Violet Whitmore, grandmother, guardian, and champion of second chances, stepped forward into her new life with joy in her heart and a little girl's hand in hers. The Ice Queen was gone, melted away by the warmth of love and the light of a child's smile. In her place stood a woman who had discovered that the greatest success of all was not found in boardrooms or balance sheets, but in the laughter of a little girl and the bonds of family forged in both joy and sorrow. As they savored their ice cream cones, sitting on a park bench and watching the ducks paddle by, Violet felt a sense of peace wash over her. The sun was warm on her face, Zoe's cheerful chatter filled the air, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. "Grandma," Zoe said, licking a drip of ice cream from her hand, "can we come here every day?" Violet chuckled. "Well, maybe not every day, sweetheart, but how about we make it a special weekend tradition? We can come to the park, feed the ducks, and if you've been good all week, we'll get ice cream too." Zoe's face lit up. "Really? Promise?" "I promise," Violet said, holding out her pinky. Zoe linked her small finger with Violet's, sealing the deal with all the solemnity a 6-year-old could muster. As they walked home, hand in sticky hand, Violet found herself thinking about the future. Zoe would be starting first grade in the fall, a milestone that filled Violet with both pride and a touch of anxiety. There would be new challenges ahead, making friends, navigating the social world of elementary school, balancing academics with playtime. But Violet felt ready for it all. She had faced down corporate raiders and market crashes. Surely she could handle first-grade drama and multiplication tables. Back at home, as Violet helped Zoe wash the sticky ice cream residue from her hands, the doorbell rang. Curious, Violet went to answer it, Zoe trailing behind her. Standing on the doorstep was Catherine Blakely, looking slightly uncomfortable in her designer suit. "Catherine," Violet said, surprised. "This is unexpected." Catherine shifted, her usual confident demeanor somewhat diminished. "Violet, I hope I'm not intruding. I was in the neighborhood for a meeting and I thought, well, I wanted to talk to you." Violet hesitated for a moment, then stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in, we were just about to have some lunch. Would you like to join us?" Catherine looked taken aback by the invitation, but nodded. "That would be lovely, thank you." As they settled in the kitchen, Zoe helping Violet prepare sandwiches, Catherine looked around, taking in the crayon drawings on the fridge, the toys scattered in the living room visible through the open doorway. "This is different from what I expected," Catherine admitted. Violet smiled, handing her a plate. "Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? Now, what brings you here, Catherine?" Catherine took a deep breath. "I wanted to apologize, Violet, for how I acted before, for the things I said. I didn't understand, but I've been following the work you're doing with the Whitmore Family Foundation, and I've seen the impact you're making. It's impressive." Violet felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you, Catherine, that means a lot." "The truth is," Catherine continued, her voice softer now, "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About my own life, my priorities. Seeing you today in the park with Zoe, you looked so happy. Happier than I've ever seen you in all our years of knowing each other." Violet reached out, placing a hand on Catherine's arm. "It's never too late to reassess what's important, Catherine. Trust me, I'm living proof of that." As they talked, Zoe piped up, "Grandma, can Miss Catherine come to our duck feeding days sometimes?" Violet laughed, looking at Catherine with a raised eyebrow. "Well, Catherine, how do you feel about ducks and ice cream?" To Violet's surprise, Catherine's eyes misted over. "I think that sounds wonderful," she said softly. As Catherine left later that afternoon, there was a new understanding between the two women. The competitive spirit that had defined their relationship for so long had been replaced by something softer, something like the beginnings of friendship. That night, as Violet tucked Zoe into bed, the little girl asked, "Grandma, are you glad you stopped being a business lady to take care of me?" Violet sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Zoe's curls. "Oh, sweetheart, taking care of you is the best job I've ever had. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it." Zoe smiled sleepily. "I'm glad you're my grandma." "And I'm glad you're my granddaughter," Violet replied, leaning down to kiss Zoe's forehead. "Sweet dreams, my little love." As she closed Zoe's door, Violet felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. For all the pain and loss that had brought them to this point, she wouldn't change a thing, because it had led her here to this life filled with love and purpose. Violet Whitmore, once the ice queen of Chicago's business world, now stood in the hallway of her home, listening to the soft breathing of her granddaughter, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that she had finally found her true calling. The future stretched out before them, filled with promise and possibility. There would be challenges, of course, but together they could face anything, because they had found in each other not just family, but home. As Violet prepared for bed that night, she paused by the window looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city lights twinkled, reminding her of the world she had left behind. But as she turned back to look at the family photos on her nightstand, she knew she had gained so much more than she had ever lost. With a contented sigh, Violet slipped into bed, her heart full of love and her mind at peace. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, new opportunities to grow and love, and she couldn't wait to face them all, with Zoe by her side. The Ice Queen had melted, transformed by the warmth of a child's love. And in her place stood a woman who had discovered that the greatest success of all was measured not in dollars and cents, but in the laughter of a little girl and the bonds of a family forged in both joy and sorrow. As sleep claimed her, Violet's last thoughts were of gratitude, for second chances, for unexpected blessings, and for the little girl who had taught her the true meaning of success and happiness. 10 years had passed since that fateful day when Violet Whitmore's life had changed forever. The Chicago skyline had evolved, new skyscrapers reaching towards the clouds, but the view from Violet's penthouse remained as breathtaking as ever. On this crisp autumn morning, Violet stood at the kitchen counter preparing breakfast. At 74, her silver hair was now streaked with white, but her blue eyes were as sharp and vibrant as ever. The sound of teenage footsteps thundering down the hallway brought a smile to her face. "Morning, Grandma," Zoe called out, sliding into the kitchen with the boundless energy of her 16 years. Her curls were piled atop her head in a messy bun, school bag slung over one shoulder. Violet turned, taking in the sight of her granddaughter. Zoe had grown into a beautiful young woman, with Claire's warm brown eyes and Jonathan's infectious smile. "Good morning, sweetheart. Pancakes?" "Yes, please." Zoe grinned, dropping her bag and moving to help set the table. It was their morning ritual, a constant in the ever-changing landscape of their lives. As they sat down to eat, Violet marveled at how far they'd come. The shy, traumatized little girl was now a confident teenager, excelling in school and passionate about carrying on her parents' legacy through volunteer work at the Whitmore Family Foundation. "So," Violet began, pouring syrup on her pancakes, "big day today, isn't it?" Zoe nodded, a mix of excitement and nervousness flashing across her face. "Yeah, my first solo presentation at the Foundation's Youth Leadership Conference. I'm kind of terrified." Violet reached across the table, squeezing Zoe's hand. "You're going to be wonderful, sweetheart. Just remember why you're doing this. To help other kids like me," Zoe said softly. "To show them that even after loss, there's hope." Pride swelled in Violet's chest. "Exactly. And you're living proof of that hope." As they finished breakfast, Violet's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it, chuckling. "Uncle Richard says good luck and don't forget to breathe." Zoe laughed. "Tell him thanks. Oh, and remind him he promised to help me with my business studies project next week." Violet shook her head in amusement. Richard, now comfortably settled into his role as CEO of Whitmore Industries, had become a beloved uncle figure to Zoe over the years. The company was thriving under his leadership, and Violet couldn't be prouder of how he'd stepped up. As they cleared the table, Violet noticed Zoe growing quiet, a familiar look of contemplation on her face. "Penny for your thoughts, sweetheart." Zoe bit her lip, a habit she'd had since childhood. I was just thinking, do you think Mom and Dad would be proud of me? Violet felt her heart constrict. Even after all these years, moments like these could still catch her off guard. She pulled Zoe into a hug, feeling the teenager lean into her embrace. "Oh, my darling girl," Violet said, her voice thick with emotion. "They would be beyond proud. You carry the best of both of them in you every day. Your father's determination, your mother's compassion. They're with us always, you know. In here." She placed a hand over Zoe's heart. Zoe nodded, wiping away a stray tear. "I know, I wish they could be here." "They are, in their own way," Violet assured her. "And I promise you, they're smiling down on you today." As Zoe went to grab her bag, Violet's gaze fell on the family photos lining the hallway. Pictures of Jonathan and Claire mixed with snapshots of her life with Zoe. First days of school, holiday celebrations, lazy summer days in the park. Each image told a story of love, loss, and the unbreakable bond they'd forged. "Ready to go, Grandma?" Zoe called, keys in hand. Another change. Zoe now drove them to most places, a fact that still occasionally startled Violet. "Ready as I'll ever be," Violet replied, grabbing her purse. The drive to the conference center was filled with Zoe's nervous chatter about her presentation. Violet listened, offering words of encouragement and gentle advice. As they pulled into the parking lot, Violet was struck by a vivid memory of Zoe's first day of kindergarten, of the tiny hand clutching hers as they walked into the school. Now, it was Zoe reaching out to squeeze Violet's hand as they entered the bustling conference center. "Thanks for being here, Grandma," she said softly. "Always, sweetheart," Violet replied. "Always." As they found their seats, Violet looked around the room filled with young people, all touched by loss in some way, all here to learn and grow. The Whitmore Family Foundation had expanded beyond her wildest dreams, touching lives across the country. It was a legacy she was profoundly proud of, one that honored Jonathan and Claire in the most beautiful way. When Zoe took the stage, Violet felt her breath catch. Gone was the nervous teenager from breakfast. In her place stood a poised young woman, her voice strong and clear as she shared her story. 10 years ago, I lost my parents," Zoe began. "I thought my world had ended. But then, I found a new beginning with my grandmother. Together we learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about love, about choosing each other every day." As Zoe continued, weaving together personal anecdotes with the Foundation's mission, Violet felt tears prick at her eyes. She thought of the journey they'd been on, of the challenges they'd faced and overcome together, of bedtime stories and skinned knees, of first crushes and broken hearts, of laughter and tears and everything in between. "Life will throw curveballs at you," Zoe was saying, her gaze sweeping the room. "It will test you in ways you never imagined, but I'm here to tell you that you're stronger than you know, that there's hope, even in the darkest times, that love can truly conquer all." As applause filled the room, Violet stood, her heart overflowing with pride and love. Zoe's eyes found hers in the crowd, and they shared a smile that spoke volumes. In that moment, Violet saw not just the teenager before her, but the little girl she'd been, the woman she was becoming. She saw Jonathan's determination and Claire's kindness. She saw the future, bright and full of promise. Later that evening, as they sat on their favorite park bench, feeding the ducks just as they had countless times over the years, Violet felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. "You know," she said, tossing a piece of bread to a particularly demanding mallard, "I used to think success was all about business deals and profit margins." Zoe leaned her head on Violet's shoulder, a gesture so familiar and comforting. "And now?" Violet wrapped an arm around her granddaughter, pulling her close. "Now I know that true success is measured in moments like these, in the lives we touch, the love we share, in watching you grow into this amazing young woman. I couldn't have done it without you, Grandma," Zoe said softly. Violet kissed the top of Zoe's head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. "Oh, my darling girl, we did it together. You saved me just as much as I saved you." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold, Violet Whitmore looked at the young woman beside her and marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From the ashes of tragedy, they had built something beautiful, a family bonded not just by blood but by choice, by love, by the daily decision to be there for each other. The Ice Queen was long gone, melted away by the warmth of a child's love. In her place was a woman, who had discovered that the greatest success, the most profound joy, came not from boardrooms or balance sheets, but from the simple, extraordinary act of loving and being loved in return. As they gathered their things to head home, Violet paused, looking out over the pond where they'd spent so many afternoons. "Thank you," she whispered, to the universe, to Jonathan and Claire, to whatever twist of fate had brought Zoe into her life. "For what, Grandma?" Zoe asked, curiosity in her eyes. Violet smiled, taking Zoe's hand in hers. "For everything, sweetheart. For every single moment." Hand in hand, grandmother and granddaughter walked home towards a future bright with promise and love. The journey hadn't always been easy, but it had been beautiful, transformative, and more rewarding than Violet could have ever imagined. In the end, Violet Whitmore had discovered the truest measure of success, a life filled with love, purpose, and the joy of watching a young life blossom. And as they stepped into the warm glow of home, Violet knew with absolute certainty that this love, this family, this life they'd built together was the greatest achievement of all. If this story touched your heart and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now and we'll see you there.